Well, we've been hearing some messages repeatedly during the course of this summit. I wonder if you picked up on them. One of them was we embrace risk with our eyes wide open. I think a lot of us want to do this, especially during 2020, right? But what we need to do to be a hero in our own way is we need to prepare ourselves for what may be unlikely events, because it's in those moments that there's enormous opportunity. Resilience and endurance are critical too. Having a mindset, though, is something else that we're hearing a lot about today. Something that lifts you beyond yourself and focuses on others. And you know, as I've been hearing our speakers, I notice that a lot of them talk about accepting this responsibility, accepting the idea that people are depending on you. Embrace that. I think this is going to be critical as we hear from Sully. You remember Sully, right? It's one of those names. It's like Elvis. Captain Sullenberger, of course. Well, I remember where I was when I heard about that remarkable landing, ditching of the plane, that U.S. airplane that had left LaGuardia, and the engines had taken on birds, and a bird strike, they call it in the industry. And it was hard to imagine that anyone would survive those circumstances, and yet he became a hero in that moment. The thing about it is, Sully, as we'll hear from him, he embraced change. And that's something that a lot of people will tell us is impossible, that you can't know what the future is going to hold. You can, however, anticipate change. You'll be tested, no matter what field you're in. So be prepared for it by getting in the habit of thinking, I'm here to help others. There are tools to help you, but you can use your own powers of intuition, your own background, your own experiences. You can pick up on the small things that are clues for the need to change, just as Aaron did. And speak up. Don't wait for others to act. These are among the best practices. So who are the masters of adaptation? Well, Commander Kelly, of course, Aaron Brockovich, Nigel Gann from Unitard, Captain Sullenberger, who we'll be hearing from shortly, and the people behind me. All these people behind me. See yourself as that agent of change. If you haven't before, think about this. Circle today's date on a calendar. The day you decided you'd become a master of adaptation, taking us not just from surviving to thriving. But what does that mindset really look like? What does it feel like? Well, just ask Craig Tiley. He is the CEO of Tennis Australia, and he's also the director of the annual Australian Open. He's credited with transforming the Open into Australia's largest and most successful international sporting event, watched by over 1 billion people worldwide. In his 6 years at the helm, Tennis Australia's revenues have more than doubled, from 160 million Australian dollars to over 450 million. And the Australian Open has gone on to become the largest annual sport and entertainment event in the Southern Hemisphere. This accelerated growth was achieved by seeing the diversification of opportunities and diversifying them himself, transforming digital and taking some pretty big risks, which have led to some enormous rewards. Now, boy, does Craig have a job ahead of him. This next challenge requires a whole nother level of creative thinking. This year's Australian Open set to go ahead, but obviously in this age of pandemic with a different look and robust scenario planning. To tell us more about risk and reward is Craig Tiley, joining us live from Melbourne, and SafetyCulture's Luke Anir to help walk us through. Craig and Luke, over to you.
Welcome to the Australian Open. And the fans are flocking in. It's cool, a little bit of a breeze, perfect weather for tennis. And we have some of the biggest stars in the men's and the women's game ready for you.
I really love Australia, so I love coming back here.
Live probably my best moments on the court on any tournament here in Australia.
Oh, that is magnificent. Oh my goodness. He's hit that from the banks of the Yarra.
The fact that it's gone so quick, but at the same time it feels like I've been out here for a long time. It's been very special.
Someone's enjoying themselves.
The Djokovic dynasty down under is still intact. It's an 8th Australian Open.
Hi Craig, welcome to the SafetyCulture 2020 Summit. It's fantastic to have you with us.
Luke, it's great to be here. It's good to have an opportunity to chat about. It gives me chills every time I see those types of pieces because it's just around the corner.
Yeah, it's not far away at all, and we've got a few minutes here to be able to unpack the Open and certainly this year and all the things that you've been working on in order to be able to make it happen. But I think it'd be great if we kind of set the scene. There's a lot of people probably think that the Australian Open and the AO brand is an Australian-only type of event, and really it's a truly international event and also an international brand with a lot of other things happening besides just the Australian Open event. So we can perhaps pull some of that apart. But first, I'd like to go back to 2007, which is when you were first given the task of really transforming this incredible event. It was, I think, the worst of the 4 majors. I think we're allowed to say that, where you're least attended, least viewed, least prize money out of the US Open, the French Open, and Wimbledon. And so, what was the vision, and what were you thinking when you first took on that job?
Well, at the beginning was to really consolidate the event that existed. It was just a sports event, and it was just about tennis. And for those people that love tennis, tennis is a truly global sport. It's played in every country, but we wanted to make it more about that. We wanted to make it about people's experience. And so we very quickly diversified the opportunities. We started to focus on becoming the Grand Slam as Asia Pacific. We changed the brand. It became the AO, the Happy Slam, which Roger Federer called it. We quickly jumped on that. And we made it about a summer party in Australia that we could showcase to the rest of the world. So it was a very clear vision. We communicated it to people. We got skills on board. We went and hired people that worked at Disney and other parts of the world that are really focused in entertainment. So for us, it was a very clear vision. We decided that we were going to become the best in food, the best in music, the best in kids and family entertainment, and more recently, the best in innovation and technology. But at the core of it would be our sport of tennis, but it wouldn't be all about tennis. It'll be about everyone's experience. And it took a while to get that going because we had to get our own teams to really understand, as well as our rusted on audience to really understand what it meant. And, for us, we've enjoyed the growth and we've enjoyed the journey, and it's probably put us in a position to have the resilience that we need to have today because we were willing to accept all that change on this journey.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I can remember you sharing with me in the past some of the sort of details around how you approach that. But one of the key things that I guess wasn't obvious to people from the outside was you became a production company. You took the rights of filming and producing all the content in-house. Can you just perhaps explain what that did for you as well and how you did it?
Well, when we decided that we were going to build a skill set in-house, is that we'd been farming out all of our opportunities and our revenue, and it was great having the partnerships, but we were not the masters of our own destiny. When we were taking risk or making decisions for big reward, there was too many people involved in that. So what I decided to do is to bring it in-house. And one of the first things we did, one of the first sports globally to actually do this, we went to our main broadcasters and we said, we'll buy back the rights to produce everything end to end. So we would bring our team together, go and get the best production people in the world. And now any tennis you see, and not only tennis, other sports that comes out of Australia, is produced by us. So we have an in-house team, expertise and production, and now it's become its revenue stream. It's really in many ways its own revenue driver. It's a business which could be carved out and be a very successful one because We have sports people producing sports, and we have entertainment people producing entertainment. And this is what they're good at, and we own it end to end. That was a shift. There's now other sports that are doing it. The Olympic Games have done that for a while, but not individual sports. And so it's good to see that it's no question the way to go, because we're able to go into Japan, for example, and we have 3 broadcast partners in Japan. And if it's northern Japan or central or southern Japan, we can completely create content and customize that content specifically for that market, even in that language. And now with the introduction of virtual signage, when you're watching in Japan, you can have Japanese advertising with Japanese companies, and then if you're watching in China, it can look very different. The tennis could be the same, but the whole picture could look very different. So that's the massive diversification and the future opportunity for us.
Wow. And what role did you see the players playing in this transformation? You're dealing with some pretty heavy hitters when it comes to the likes of Serena Williams and Rafael Nadal and others. What role were they going to play in this transformation for you, and how did you value their role in it?
Yeah, it's a great question, Luke, because the first thing you have to do is tennis, unlike other sports, they're independent contractors. So anytime you want them to do something, you need to pay. And there's a lot of things you want these players to do, and they're not, and it's not that straightforward. So the very first thing you do is the number one initiative we had was we were going to become the players' favorite slam, the players' favorite global sporting event. We were also going to launch the sports and entertainment season for the rest of the world in January, and that's a bold position we took early. Maybe people could look at it and say it's not one with much humbleness, but we said to heck with it. That's the position we're going to hold, and wouldn't that without the support of the playing group. And so very quickly we focused on the relationship. What could we do throughout the year? And there's not a day that goes by, even today, where we don't connect and contact the players, see how they're doing, with their births in their family, birthdays, celebrations, and we want them to feel part and close to us. So when we do ask for some help, we're able to get it. And then when they come on site and they come in January, we're very lucky, because for the rest of the world and for those living in the Southern Hemisphere, January is a great time, particularly Australia. You've got blue skies, sunny skies, blue skies. And the weather's fantastic, and you can have that brought on your screen to the rest of the world. So if you're sitting in the Northern Hemisphere and it's cold and dark and dreary, you get a bit uplifted by seeing something that's fun. So the players are a critical part of it, and that's why when we call on the players to do things for us, whether it be raise funds or whether it be play at a time of the day or a time of the night where it's not exactly suited to your own schedule or your own rhythm of preparation, they're able to do it. So I'm proud of the fact that over the last 8 years we are one of the favorite places that the players enjoy playing.
Yeah, you hear it every year, and they don't necessarily say it at all the other events they go to, and you can tell it's genuine when people say this truly is their favourite event, and they also are very quick to give you credit for organising such a wonderful tournament every year, and it's great to see. The length that you go to, though, like we're talking about facilities that have been built underneath the tennis courts just for the players. We've got restaurants and eating areas for the players and their coaching teams. You've even got an MRI machine, is that right?
Yeah, so we pretty much, I mean, it's on the site. We have 553 players. They bring their entourage. It ends up being close to about 6,000 people that we accredit in a high secure area. We have 850,000 people come through the gates, and about another 200,000 hanging out around enjoying the party outside of the gates. So it's big numbers. A lot of security, a lot of logistics, and it's for 3 weeks, so it's an intense 3 weeks. But to pull it off with the playing group, we have to have everything. So basically, a medical center in-house. They can eat any type of food from any restaurant. Some of them, we have an assigned chef to some of the players, and that whatever food they specifically want and dietary requirements they have, they can get from that chef. So behind the scenes, we have over the last 8-9 years now invested $1 billion into our precinct, which is right next to the city, and that is about having the best facilities. We have 3 stadiums with retractable roofs, over 30 tennis courts, and and a hospital basically on site, so you get any type of treatment you need to get without going anywhere. And the challenge for us always is that's great for 3 weeks, and how to utilize and monetize that for the rest of the year, because we've got such magnificent facilities. But and that's part of our business growth and how we look at it. But again, people look at that, it's risky making investments in those types of things that you're just going to maximize for a short period of time. But that's what we do. We make sure we get full use of the opportunity. Players appreciate that. In fact, even if you want a filling in your tooth, you can get that. So there's anything that we provide on site.
Wow, yeah, there's so much going on, more than just people hitting a green fluffy ball across the court. That's for sure. Right. And so I think if you sort of look back, this year's been obviously an unprecedented year. That term's been overused, but maybe just give us a little bit of colour in regards to what you were dealing with at the 2020 Australian Open in January, because it was just at the start of what we now call COVID, but you had a lot of other things happening as well, didn't you, that you had to contend with?
Yeah, well, this year, I mean, 2020, I mean, where do you start? One thing that is in life always that is constant is change. And it's always to the extent of how much change. And sometimes you've got to create change. And we've always been an organization that's done that. I've always believed in building resilience. You go and create as much change as you possibly can. And you have a very agile workforce, and you have a team of people that not only love doing what they're doing, but they know that at any point it can change. So when January 2020 started this year, we knew that there was going to be some challenges, because Australia it was the beginning of the bushfire season, and all of a sudden it was a year that was far more chaotic and far more tragic than we had ever experienced before. And we were rolling into the Australia about a month of significant bushfires on the east coast, primarily of Australia, and the devastation was unbelievable. And it was mainstream news around the world. We didn't know at that time that we were comfortable that the bushfires were far enough away from Melbourne, but we learned very quickly it wasn't the fires themselves, but it was the air quality that was going to change things for us. So on the eve of qualifying, really a few days before, all of a sudden the smoke haze came over Melbourne where you could hardly see in front of your face. And therefore, to play a tennis match seemed completely irrelevant when people were losing their lives. We'd shipped in thousands of people from around the world that arrived in Australia to play this event. And now we had to find a way very quickly over 24 hours how to manage it. So we mobilized the team, set up a crisis management team, and very quickly we had our clear streams, developed scenarios. And the first thing we had to create was an air quality index, which hadn't been created for tennis. And so brought in some specialists, and because you need that to figure out what that is. And we created an air quality index at what's the minimum level we would compete at that would be safe for players to play and for fans to watch. And it was the first day we opened up, and of course there again was the smoke haze. And in the course of that day, just like we had a heat index, which we created 5 years ago, and in Australia, there's lots of heat, and there's certain conditions of which it becomes then dangerous to compete. And we have a heat index that exactly calculates that using a series of measures on site. So this was just really pivoting into air quality index, which is now becoming standard for us, and and then communicating it to your audience and your players and what levels you're going to play, and making sure you get that right. Well, we had a couple of tough days to start, and it was touch and go whether or not we're going to cancel our lead in our qualifying events. But we plowed through, and we got there, and we had our most successful event. But this was in the context, in the backdrop of people losing their lives and their property, and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hectares in Australia. And but again, we mobilized the playing group to come to assist us. And I think it's again a testament. We came out of that, and shortly we'll talk about the pandemic, because it was actually 10 days later we were notified about a virus that was a possibility during the event, and we had to take mitigating circumstances then. So 2020 is a month and a half to go. We're happy to be behind us.
Yeah, I bet. And before we jump into sort of this year going forward after the event and COVID, And I think you would have to be one of the masters of adaptation out of all the leaders that we get to see and that I've certainly met. We've got some footage, though, I think, that kind of can just set the scene and show people exactly to what extent were the challenges that you're dealing with. So we'll just have a look at that clip first, and then we'll come back and talk about adaptation.
This is going to be a long, hot, dry and dangerous fire season.
Tourists and locals evacuated en masse.
Just worry about people, you worry about your life.
In the blaze that's blackened 1.2 million hectares of Victoria's...
We were really scared. We were really scared.
We've got the most toxic air in the world at the moment, so it's pretty sad. So, yeah, it's tough. Tennis Australia, we've organised something on Wednesday night. I'm not too sure how it's going to work.
How are you? I love that the whole country and the whole city has gotten together and raising money for the bushfires.
Always it's nice to be on court with the friends and try to help in some ways.
It's going to be a fun night. We're going to have a blast out there and hopefully we'll raise a ton of money.
Yeah, talking with Roger a couple of hours ago, we decided to give 250,000 Australian dollars to the barn fires reliefs together. So
the movement I started was just me on my phone. It gained a lot of traction. I'd see a lot of athletes, getting involved and just trying to raise some funds. Obviously, the more aces, the better. But, what's going on at the moment it's devastating. People losing their homes, their lives. It's given us the platform to help.
See, next gen,
yeah,
how slow they are. Unbelievable.
It's a good feeling, get together, as a tennis family. It's exciting to be able to help tonight.
Nick Kyrgios! The 20-time Grand Slam winner, Roger Federer!
Follows it up with an ace.
And another $100 to the aces tally.
I'm pleased to announce the total now stands at $4,826,014.
I got goosebumps when you said that number and when everyone, came together tonight. It's just an amazing feeling.
Wow, that's incredible what you did in that event, and maybe you can just sort of help us understand just how adaptable you and your team are to go from a crisis like the bushfires to then starting to become the main theme of the event to then turning it into a fundraising charity. What goes through your mind? How do you just adapt to that?
Well, I think the first thing in that case, Luke, was how can we help? But it's been built back from before. We have a great relationship with the players. So I personally go and ask each of them would they participate in a fundraising night. We put that event together in 24 hours. That piece you saw was done by our production team, probably one of the 18-year-olds in the team that's very creative. And they do a magnificent job. And then our operations team who have to have the resilience and have to be adaptable because of the hundreds of thousands of people that they're entertaining in the month of January. And this was just a last minute. And in fact, the first time we did this, we did what we called Hit for Haiti. And it was many years ago during the earthquake, not that many years ago, but during the earthquake in Haiti, we very quickly raised $3 million for Haiti overnight. So we've had a few fundraising efforts when there's been a disaster. In fact, the players have a running joke with me. They say that anytime the Australian Open comes around, there's some disaster that we're going to be supporting. And I said, I'd prefer that not to be the case because we don't want to have that. But this year we had two at the same time. So the bushfires were significant, the most significant Australia's experienced. But the players came together very quickly. We put an event, we sold tickets to an event, we filled the stadium, we broadcast it around the world. We designed a show. The players participated. It was all about them, and we started on a journey of just raising money. But then that night is when we really raised most of the money, and every cent of that $6 million has gone directly to the affected communities to help them rebuild their homes and get back on their feet. So and tennis has played that role. And is it to promote tennis? Yes, maybe. but it's probably a bit more just a simple humanity thing. And also, I use it personally to get our organization to be adaptable, to take some risks, and to show what's possible. Because for us to grow and have the platform that we have, and we're on track to be a $1 billion company, and to do that, we've got to be able to act that way and have that type of agility. So I'm really proud of the group. We had a crisis management team set up. It had 4 streams. It had a business continuity and recovery stream. Then it had a people stream, people and safety stream. It had a stream on how we manage our stakeholders. And because we have a series of stakeholders, so there was a leadership stakeholder stream. And at the second week of the Open this year, we got a call saying that there was a rumor and a possibility that there was a virus that had been, at that time, had been impacting people in China, and particularly Wuhan. And we had some visitors from Wuhan, and some that were about to come to the Australian Open. So again, we had to, within 24 hours, very quickly change. And this was towards the end of the Open. We started with some testing, and we were fortunately in a position by the time we got to that second week where we thought the Australian Open is done. There's not going to be a pandemic. We got through it. There was no one that tested positive for the virus, and this was in January. And little did we know that when we sent that crisis management team to take a break after a very tough summer because of the fires, we'd be calling everyone back to start planning for the pandemic.
Yeah, wow. And perhaps we can talk a little bit about that now, because it's obviously front and centre for the 2021 Australian Open. 1.2 billion people, I think, watch the event on TV around the world. It goes pretty much to all corners of the earth. And so what is the preparation like in the middle of this? You're trying to bring players, the world's best players, from all over into Melbourne and guarantee governments and obviously families and staff of all those people that everyone's going to be safe. So how do you do that?
Well, we'd have to spend hours talking about this, but we won't. We'll put it into a quick snapshot. But once we set up our crisis management team, a biosecurity team, so it's led by a group. One thing we did in the company is, we took leadership right throughout the company, gave people an opportunity to be in front of it and to lead these groups. And we very quickly, within a week, developed scenarios, which back in March was 5 scenarios, and today it's 10. Because you just keep building scenarios on it and have to be adaptable based on your environment. And in fact, over the last 24 hours, we've added another scenario, which is potentially even more realistic because of the situation that we have here in Melbourne and Australia, and the desire to keep, the infection rate basically at 0 and the deaths at 0. And while that's a great an aspirational objective, we also become the victims of our own success on that, because that means international travel gets really challenged. But the scenarios we developed were all the way from having an Australian Open that looked the same as 2020 and 2021 to cancelling the event. And within that, we did our financial planning, our cash flow analysis. We went 3 years out, because we were the belief when you have a pandemic, you're going to be impacted for at least that period of time. And it's going to take you at least that period of time to come out of it, get back to your platforms of growth. So by mobilizing the team, by setting those objectives in the scenarios, by being very public and very transparent and clear about what they were, and having 3 simple objectives, making sure that the company remained viable, number 1. Number 2 is taking care of your people. And number 3 is making sure that you kept living your values that the organization had set pre the pandemic. Because if you didn't, then the fabric of the organization would fall apart. And that's how we became quickly adaptable. I believed that, and I've learned this more now than I did at the beginning, and I do have an insatiable desire to learn from others, and I very quickly have figured that there's 2 things you got to take care of during this period and to be adaptable in. The one is your business, and the other one is yourself. And in the business, this is really it's and especially if you're in a leadership role, but in the business side, this has been about shifting, becoming more agile, over communicating. Communicate more than you ever have communicated before, and having really the business understand that it's going to be different every single day, and talk your teams through that. I've also learned that you have to get things done fast, not perfect, And that really suits my style because I do prefer asking for forgiveness than permission. So in this environment, just get it done. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then taking care of yourself, you got to become the best compartmentalizer you possibly can. And you've got to figure out on a schedule how to take a break and how to take rest. And fresh air is the most important thing you can have. So these are just to very quickly principally set those and then go on the journey. Little did we know that where we were in March to where we're going to be today is completely different. But the journey we've been on and the flexibility that we've instilled in the company, everyone's been able to adapt. I set an objective. I didn't want people to lose their jobs. And I want to keep the company whole. I want to find a way to get to the other side. And the other side was going to be a few years. And back in March, we didn't expect that the government restrictions would be as challenging as they are today. And it's not a fault of the government. It's just there's an objective in Australia to keep the virus out of the country. So while the rest of the world can look at this, and in Queensland, we can have 52,000 people at a rugby league game, and we can have stadiums that are full. We have that because there's no virus really, for the most part, in the country. And that's happened because there's no international travel into the country. It's been kept out. And our event relies on two things: mass gatherings and international travel. And those are two things you cannot do in a pandemic.
Yeah, wow. It's interesting, a couple of things you touched on, and just to give people a sense of the scale of your team, I think it sits at about 500 typically during the year and then swells to about 9,000 people, including volunteers for the event. So this is a massive logistic operation. And the other thing, when you talk about taking care of yourself, a lot of people who probably see the Australian Open wouldn't realise that you're actually there every single day for 2 weeks, an hour, I think, before the first game until the end of the last game, which is often 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And is that right? You're running on very little sleep.
Yeah, look, I mean, as a leader, that's your responsibility. Yeah, and don't expect people to do what you're not going to. And I think that's it's natural for me. If you love what you're doing, it's really easy. And I always tell people, find it can be anything. Find something that you love that you're doing, and that you'll find that you won't have to get sleep. But that's the least of our worries, because we every single day is really, you wake up and you have crises. Even this year we had what we called brown rain, and that was because of the bushfires. There was so much in the sky, in the clouds. There was so much dirt, and it rained, and all that dirt came through, and it put mud across the entire side. A 2.5 kilometer side was covered in mud. And within 3 hours, we had overcome that. So as an organization, unless you have that resilience and adaptability built in, you're not going to achieve that. I didn't have any doubt that was going to happen. And that was about, again, 5 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, so you have to make the commitment. I love what I do, and I love the people I work with. So it's really pretty easy. And I love the problems we have in front of us right now. And we're dealing with the Prime Minister and the premiers and the governors of states. And, that in itself is, I mean, and we'll talk here on 2021, but we've got a whole bunch of options in front of us for 2021. And, we're not going to, it's not going to be something we're going to wonder about. We're going to make something happen.
That's great. Yeah, your passion really comes through, and I think it's very easy for people to get a sense on how genuine you are. The other thing is, like, this is a not-for-profit organisation that you've been building and leading, and which is phenomenal, and credit to you and your team for what you do. And it really says a lot about the motivation behind it. It's truly incredible. We can go on for hours here, but we have got questions coming in from people who would love to be able to ask you some questions as well. We've got, I think, some live questions too. One from Budapest, actually, from Zarsby Burkus. I think I pronounced that correctly. So we'll just cross over to Budapest, and here's Zarby's question.
Hello there, good evening, and good morning to Craig. Thank you very much for having this opportunity. I'm also from the sports business, from swimming, but my question is related to the core of entertainment. You mentioned that in tennis, you added additional experience to fans, fan zones, kid zone, etc. In the past 10-15 years, the popularity of tennis as a global sport has grown in large part thanks to the rivalry among the big three. How do you see the future of AO and in 2-3 years' time when Roger, Rafa, and Novak will have retired, or at least no more in contention for final or semi-final or quarter-final spots? How can the new stars, the next gen, keep tennis and AO in particular make the event as visited during the record year in 2020 when you had more than 800,000 visitors?
It's a good question. I always believed that you know, when Borg and Radulova and Evert retired, then Agassi and Sampras came along, and then the Williams came along, and then Federer and Nadal. It'll happen again. And we wanted the Australian event. We'd love Australians to do well in it, but we had to make it a global event. So there's superstars on the doorstep. I have no doubt that the future is very bright. These are magnificent athletes, magnificent entertainers. We're providing a platform for them to entertain on. And I think, you know, in the future, you've got people like Coco Gauff and Naomi Osaka, Ash Barty, an Australian, on the women's side. And that's what's great about our sport. It's equal, men and women. You get equal opportunity. Since the 70s, we've paid equal prize money. This year, actually, we'll tell everyone here, but there's going to be at least $70 million to play for the men and women over those 2 weeks. And on the men's side, and the young players coming up, we were the entertainer on Nick Kyrgios, and who I think is a great entertainer, but you know, Stefanos Tsitsipas and Zverev, and so there's going to be some magnificent rivalries moving forward and some young players. So I'm very optimistic about the sport, and you know, there's a massive opportunity to continue to enjoy that. Ultimately it's the stars that make it happen. It's not us. We just provide the platform.
Terrific. Thanks, Albi, for your question. We have one other question, I think, that's come in on Twitter. Ariel Sami has asked, what opportunities have emerged from the global pandemic to engage audiences with sport? So is this essentially, you think, helped to create more viewership where people have got more time, or how do you see it affecting sport globally?
That's something we really look at every single day, and live sport is still the one bit of gold when it comes to entertainment on television or on any kind of platform. It's more valuable, and that's why people pay so much money for it, because you don't know the outcome. That's why the integrity of sport has to absolutely at all costs be protected, because the moment you can predict or know the outcome, you lose that initiative. So in this period, when people have been locked down in their homes and have to be isolated because of the virus, to be able to use your screen or whatever device you can to experience live sport, even without an audience, is something we're getting great feedback on. Now, the broadcast numbers are not what they used to be, because the energy is not the same when you don't have people in the stadium enjoying it. But that'll come back over time, and it'll remain. So there's a massive opportunity to keep promoting live sport and to offer it in any form and any content. The big thing for us that we're looking at in our innovation and tech side of our business is that, how do we create a personal engagement through your device with that live sport? Whether it be, you know, you yourself manipulating the scoring or predicting what's going to happen, or you know. So this is really the future for us, is to personalize everyone's experience with live sport. But I think what the pandemic has done is just accentuated the fact that mass gatherings and international travel is what sport needs, and we haven't been able to have that, so everyone's had to adapt, and they've adapted pretty well so far.
Wow, yeah, it's fascinating. We had another question from Twitter from Haley. Risk can lead to bigger rewards, but also big failures. So how do you navigate making the right calls versus that risk versus reward?
Well, we ride in that right now. Just over the last 12 hours, the government informed us that the quarantine program we had for 2021 is now no longer can be in December, and they're delaying the opening of the borders here in Victoria and Melbourne. As a consequence, that's now pushed us to January. So when anyone comes internationally to Australia, they've got to quarantine in their hotel room for 2 weeks. But you cannot, as a high-performing athlete, quarantine in a hotel room for 2 weeks and then roll out the next day and play a Grand Slam, one of your 4 majors. A Formula One car driver couldn't be sitting in a hotel room for 2 weeks and then roll out the next day and have a race. So now we have to figure out, which maybe someone on this call can give you some ideas, but now we've got to figure out how do we quarantine the athletes, and how do we move immediately into playing the Australian Open? Do we move the Australian Open by a week or two? Do we postpone the month of it and work with the global tennis community to look at it at a different time of the year? Do we cancel it? Or do we just go for it and try and work with the players to put treadmills in their room and weights in their room, and get them a chance to get out and practice and hit some balls? So that's what we're going through now, and it could end up in be any of those scenarios. And what we have to do is remember, at the beginning I said we've got to protect the viability of the company and the safety of the people. So everything has to steer towards that objective. So it's a live example of what's happening right now. But the objective remains: we want to have an entertainment event for the players to earn a living, and for our fans to enjoy the spectacle. And we just got to figure out a way to do that. And again, just the last 12 hours, the teams had to completely adapt, because we've already spent $17 million in preparing, which is sunk costs, preparing for a December quarantine. Just overnight, that changed. So if we're not an organization that can keep shifting, we're not going to survive. But I'm pretty confident that following this call, because early in the morning, we'll be back at it and figuring out a plan on how to make it work.
And you also looked at overseas quarantine, I think I understand, as well as an option. Is that right?
Everything's on the table, and that's what's great about creativity, is anything goes. And yeah, we have a proposal. We think we can quarantine players. It's a lot of players. We can quarantine in another city. We can create a green corridor into Australia where you could take the players from that quarantine program in a biosecure bubble. We call them the bio bubbles. In our bio bubble, you can take them to the tarmac of an airport, where we have a plane waiting for them that we've chartered, a large plane. You put them on there, you have them arrive, you have them tested a couple of times, and if you were negative in that quarantine period, and if you're negative then, surely that's something that would be able to be accepted to be worked. But I'm not going to make that decision. That's going to be a decision made by the health authorities. And if they accept it, we're good to go. But if they don't, we have to find another solution. And this is the balance. And ultimately, the health authorities under this pandemic in every country are making the rules.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a great proposal, and here you are innovating yet again, trying to help governments and the whole community really move forward. So it's incredible to see. Just as we're about to wrap up, I'd just love for you to share a little bit about the future of AO, this incredible organisation that you've been leading. What's next for you? Where do you see it going from here?
Well, look, it's a good question, and I think about that every day, because we've had exponential growth. We've been very fortunate and privileged to be able to do that. I'm just the custodian of this organization at this point in time, and have the privilege to lead it. But I see us really focusing on innovation and tech and production. I see us creating solutions not only for the game. I see us do more aggregation and partnerships with other sports and entertainment franchises around the world and linking into that. I see exponential growth in more diversifying the business, not just in sport and entertainment, but in also how you, in many ways, how you access things you enjoy. I mean, everyone is on our devices so much, and if we can create live experiences, I see that shifting. I mean, the Australian Open this year was a good example. We were on the court. We have AO, which stands for Australian Open. Those two letters can be in many 50,000 words. The AO exists, and that was why it was a brand position we had. And this year we shifted the Australian Open because of the bushfires. No one visited Australia, so the Prime Minister actually called me on the eve of the Australian Open and said, "What can you do to help?" Well, we changed the brand in January to Australia is Open, not Australian Open. Nice. And we wrote it on the court. We wrote it on all of our digital walls. We put it on the website, and it was promoting to the world, we're still open. Still come and visit the country and enjoy the country. Even though there's bushfires raging, it's still a place to visit. We didn't know, again, a month and a half later it would be closed because of the pandemic. But it's just about shifting, and I think there's lots of opportunities in our organization to shift. The people in the organization will continue to come up with the ideas for growth and the ideas that we can monetize and be successful. But we would like to have a social responsibility too. We're a sport. It's a sport you play. You get exercise, you socialize, men and women. You can play it your whole. It's got the best virtues and opportunities of any other sport, and it's a common language. And we'd like more people to play that, because we think then that does help with health and socially, and but then what other social responsibility do we have as an organization? But my last comment would be, during this time, you tend to focus inwards, and my objective is to get our company to keep focusing outwards, because surviving and focusing inwards, you may put a lid on your growth.
Wow, I think that's a very fitting way to wrap it up. I don't think it could be said any better. Craig, you're a phenomenal leader, someone that I think a lot of us can learn from, and the work you do is truly amazing and affects a lot of people and has a massive impact. So there's a lot that we still could have covered. You've created a game with Nadal for playing tennis on the phone. You've done all sorts of things. There's so much more than just running a sporting event that you do, and I think it's great for everybody to be able to tune in come January and watch the 2021 event. But it's fantastic you're able to join us and share some of the insights and wisdom with us. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Luke. Great opportunity. Thank you.